Welcome, and thank you for being here. Today, we are going to explore a question that quietly challenges everything we think we know about human history. It is not about sudden disasters or dramatic revelations. Instead, it is about an assumption so familiar that we rarely stop to question it: the idea that human civilization has always moved forward in a straight line. Most history textbooks present progress as a simple sequence. First, early humans used stone tools. Then came farming, writing, cities, industry, and finally the modern technological world. According to this view, each generation builds upon the last, and advancement steadily increases over time. The past is seen as simple, while the present is considered the peak of human achievement. But what if this picture is incomplete? This linear model assumes that early humans were limited not only in tools, but also in organization, knowledge, and creativity. It suggests that intelligence and innovation slowly improved over thousands of years, reaching sophistication only in recent history. Yet human biology has remained largely the same for tens of thousands of years. The minds that built modern society are not fundamentally different from those that existed deep in prehistory. If intelligence was always present, then progress may not have been guaranteed. Civilizations could have risen, achieved remarkable levels of understanding, and then declined, leaving little behind. Environmental changes, resource exhaustion, or social breakdown could interrupt development, forcing survivors to start again with fewer tools and less knowledge. Over time, these resets would make history appear simpler the further back we look. This raises an important possibility. What we call primitive may not represent humanity's starting point, but rather the remains of earlier chapters we no longer remember. Tonight's story begins with this idea: not to reject modern history, but to gently question whether the human past followed a single, uninterrupted path forward, or something far more complex and fragile. When people hear the phrase advanced technology, they often imagine glowing screens, complex machines, or digital systems powered by electricity. This modern image can unintentionally limit how we interpret the past. It creates the assumption that if ancient societies did not leave behind metal devices, engines, or electronic tools, then they could not have achieved a high level of technical understanding. However, this assumption may be misleading. Technology is not defined by appearance alone. At its core, technology is applied knowledge, the ability to understand natural forces, materials, and systems, and to use that understanding to solve problems efficiently. By this definition, a society does not need wires, engines, or computers to be considered advanced. Precision, durability, scale, and purpose matter just as much as complexity. Many ancient structures demonstrate extraordinary accuracy in measurement, alignment, and construction. Massive stones were shaped and fitted together so tightly that even modern tools would struggle to replicate the results. Some sites show clear awareness of astronomy, geometry, acoustics, and environmental engineering. These achievements suggest careful planning and deep knowledge, even if the tools used were simple by today's standards. It is also possible that earlier technologies focused on areas we no longer prioritize. Instead of speed or automation, they may have optimized for longevity, harmony with the environment, or collective use rather than individual convenience. Techniques involving stone, water, sound, or organic materials could be highly sophisticated while leaving few recognizable traces after thousands of years. If we judge ancient innovation only by modern expectations, we risk overlooking forms of intelligence that do not fit our current framework. Advanced technology does not need to resemble our own to be effective. It only needs to work within the knowledge, resources, and goals of its time. Understanding this opens the door to a broader view of the past, one where progress is measured not by how familiar it looks, but by how skillfully humans once understood and shaped the world around them. Across different continents and time periods, ancient civilizations left behind evidence that suggests a level of understanding far beyond what is often attributed to them. These traces do not point to random experimentation or trial and error construction, but to organized systems of knowledge passed down and carefully applied. Many ancient sites reveal precise mathematical relationships embedded in their design. Proportions, angles, and distances appear intentionally calculated rather than accidental. In some cases, structures align perfectly with solar cycles, equinoxes, solstices, or specific stars, requiring long-term observation and accurate record-keeping. Such achievements imply not only technical skill, but also a deep awareness of time, space, and natural patterns. There are also signs of advanced material knowledge. Stones of extreme hardness were shaped with smooth surfaces and sharp edges, sometimes fitted together so closely that gaps are barely visible. These results suggest techniques for cutting, polishing, and transporting materials that are still debated today. Even without metal tools as we know them, the consistency and scale of the work point to standardized methods and skilled specialists. Water management offers another clue. Ancient systems of canals, reservoirs, and underground channels show a strong understanding of fluid behavior, pressure, and sustainability. These networks were often designed to last for centuries, supplying entire populations while minimizing waste and damage to the surrounding environment. What makes these achievements especially striking is their global distribution. Similar principles appear in distant cultures that had no known contact with one another. This suggests that human intelligence, when faced with similar challenges, may independently reach comparable levels of sophistication. Rather than viewing ancient societies as technologically limited, it may be more accurate to see them as differently advanced. Their knowledge was shaped by necessity, environment, and long-term thinking. What remains today may only be fragments, but even these fragments hint at systems of understanding far more complex than they first appear. Some of the most enduring questions about early human history come from monumental structures that seem to defy simple explanations. These constructions are not small or experimental. They are massive, deliberate, and often built with a level of precision that appears inconsistent with the tools traditionally assigned to their time periods. Across the world, enormous stone blocks were quarried, transported over long distances, and placed with remarkable accuracy. In many cases, the stones fit together so closely that even thin blades cannot pass between them. The surfaces are smooth, the angles exact, and the overall designs consistent across entire sites. This level of uniformity suggests careful planning and standardized techniques rather than improvisation. What makes these structures even more intriguing is their durability. Many have survived earthquakes, erosion, and thousands of years of environmental change. Their builders clearly understood weight distribution, balance, and structural stability. These are not qualities that emerge accidentally. They point to accumulated experience and tested knowledge. In addition to engineering skill, many monuments show an awareness of their surroundings. Their placement often takes into account the landscape, natural light, and celestial events. Some are positioned to interact with the sun or stars at specific times of the year, while others are designed to channel sound or airflow in controlled ways. Such features suggest an integrated understanding of architecture, nature, and human use. Modern technology can explain how these structures might be built today, but it does not fully explain how they were built then. The absence of clear evidence for the methods used does not mean those methods did not exist. It may simply mean they relied on techniques or materials that did not survive the passage of time. These monuments stand as silent records of human capability. They suggest that ancient builders may have possessed practical knowledge that was later forgotten, leaving behind structures that still challenge our assumptions about what early civilizations could achieve. The idea that human civilization steadily improves over time is comforting, but it may not reflect how societies actually develop. History, even in well-documented periods, shows repeated patterns of growth, peak, decline, and rebuilding. Empires rise with strong systems of knowledge and organization, then weaken as conditions change. When resources become scarce, climates shift, or internal structures fail, even highly developed societies can fragment. If this pattern holds true in recent history, it is reasonable to consider that it may also apply to deep prehistory. Early civilizations could have reached impressive levels of sophistication, only to be disrupted by forces beyond their control. Floods, prolonged droughts, volcanic activity, or gradual environmental changes could make established ways of life unsustainable. When survival becomes the priority, complex systems are often the first to disappear. As populations shrink or migrate, specialized knowledge can be lost. Skills once held by architects, engineers, or planners may no longer be passed on. Over generations, what remains is a simplified version of the original culture, adapted to new conditions but disconnected from earlier achievements. To later observers, this can look like the beginning of civilization, rather than a recovery from collapse. This perspective changes how we interpret the archaeological record. Gaps in evidence may not represent periods when humans were incapable, but moments when continuity was broken. Each recovery would begin with fewer tools and less shared knowledge, creating the illusion of a slow, upward climb. Seeing civilization as cyclical rather than linear does not diminish modern progress. Instead, it highlights how fragile advancement can be. It suggests that human potential has existed for far longer than recorded history indicates, and that what we inherit today may be only the latest chapter in a much older, repeating story of discovery, loss, and rediscovery. One of the strongest arguments for missing chapters in human history is the power of natural forces to erase evidence. Earth is not a static archive. Landscapes shift, coastlines change, and entire regions can be transformed over relatively short periods of time. For early societies, especially those living near water or fertile land, these changes could be devastating. Rising sea levels after the last ice age submerged vast areas that were once habitable. Coastal settlements, which often serve as centers of trade and innovation, would have been among the first to disappear beneath the ocean. Any structures built from wood, clay, or other perishable materials would leave little trace after thousands of years underwater. On land, erosion, earthquakes, and volcanic activity continually reshape the surface. Rivers alter their courses, burying settlements beneath layers of sediment. Forests reclaim abandoned cities. Over time, even large stone constructions can be damaged, dismantled, or repurposed by later populations, further obscuring their original context. Climate change also plays a crucial role. Extended droughts or sudden shifts in temperature can destabilize food systems and force migrations. When populations move, they rarely carry entire knowledge systems with them. Writing may be lost, records destroyed, and traditions broken. What survives is often practical and immediate, not historical or technical. From a modern perspective, the absence of clear evidence can feel definitive. Yet in geological time, the loss of evidence is the norm rather than the exception. Entire ecosystems vanish with barely a trace. Human societies, especially early ones, are no different. If advanced communities once existed, natural forces could have removed most signs of their presence. What remains may be scattered, incomplete, and difficult to interpret, leaving us with fragments that hint at a deeper past, but stop just short of telling the full story. When imagining ancient civilizations, it is easy to focus on what has survived rather than what has been lost. Stone monuments endure, but they represent only a small fraction of what any functioning society would have built. Most everyday structures, tools, and systems were likely made from materials that do not withstand the passage of deep time. Wood, plant fibers, leather, clay, and simple metals degrade quickly when exposed to moisture, bacteria, and changing temperatures. Even under ideal conditions, these materials break down over centuries, not millennia. Entire cities constructed from such resources could disappear almost completely, leaving behind only faint traces in the soil. Early societies may also have prioritized efficiency over permanence. Temporary or adaptable structures make sense in environments that demand flexibility. From a survival perspective, durability is less important than function. Yet this practical approach leaves little for future archaeologists to uncover. Technological systems themselves may have relied on organic processes or natural forces. Water-driven mechanisms, sound-based techniques, or chemical processes using biodegradable substances would leave almost no recognizable remains. Without obvious artifacts, such technologies would be invisible in the archaeological record. Even metal is not immune to time. Corrosion, recycling, and reuse by later cultures can erase evidence of earlier advancements. Valuable materials are rarely left untouched. They are melted down, reshaped, or incorporated into new structures, disconnecting them from their original context. This means that what we find today is heavily biased toward what could survive, not what was most important or most advanced. Absence of surviving materials does not imply absence of knowledge. Understanding this limitation is essential when evaluating the past. It reminds us that history is incomplete by nature, shaped not only by what was built, but by what time allowed us to see. Knowledge often feels permanent, especially in a world where information is constantly recorded and stored. However, history shows that understanding is far more fragile than it appears. When systems that preserve and transmit knowledge fail, even advanced ideas can vanish in a surprisingly short time. Early societies relied heavily on oral traditions, apprenticeship, and specialized roles. Skills were passed from one generation to the next through direct teaching rather than written records. If a small group of experts was lost due to migration, environmental stress, or social collapse, their knowledge could disappear with them. Writing systems, when they existed, were not always widespread. Literacy was often limited to specific classes or institutions. If those structures broke down, records could be destroyed, forgotten, or rendered meaningless when the language itself was no longer understood. Without continuity, written knowledge becomes inaccessible, even if physical texts survive. Complex technologies also depend on supporting systems. Tools require maintenance, materials require sourcing, and processes require coordination. When population levels drop or trade networks collapse, these systems can no longer function. Over time, technologies are abandoned, simplified, or replaced by methods that demand fewer resources. What remains is often a reduced version of the original culture, practical, resilient, but disconnected from earlier achievements. To later observers, this can create the impression that sophistication is increasing for the first time, when in reality it may be returning after a long absence. This pattern suggests that loss of knowledge is not unusual, but expected during periods of instability. Human understanding does not always move forward. It pauses, fragments, and sometimes disappears entirely, leaving behind gaps that shape how we interpret the past. As knowledge fades and systems break down, the visible signs of a once developed society can change dramatically. What remains after a collapse is rarely a clear reflection of what existed before. Instead, it is a simplified version shaped by survival, limited resources, and immediate needs. When complex technologies disappear, people adapt by using what is available. Tools become smaller, techniques more basic, and structures easier to construct. This shift does not indicate a loss of intelligence, but a change in priorities. Maintaining advanced systems requires stability, cooperation, and surplus conditions that may no longer exist. Over generations, memories of earlier achievements can become fragmented. Stories replace records and explanations become symbolic rather than technical. Knowledge that was once practical may be preserved only in ritual, tradition, or myth. Without context, these fragments are difficult to recognize as remnants of earlier sophistication. From an archaeological perspective, this creates a misleading picture. Later layers of settlement may appear simpler than earlier ones, suggesting a gradual rise from basic to complex. In reality, the opposite may have occurred. A community might be rebuilding after a loss, not advancing for the first time. This process can also influence how history is taught. When evidence of advanced capability is scarce or ambiguous, it is often dismissed as coincidence or anomaly. Simpler explanations feel safer and more familiar, even if they do not fully account for what is observed. Understanding this dynamic encourages caution. What looks primitive is not always original. It may represent the final stage of a much longer story, one in which complexity existed, was lost, and left behind only faint outlines that challenge our assumptions about the distant past. Myths are often treated as pure imagination, created to explain the unknown or to entertain. Yet across cultures separated by vast distances, similar themes appear again and again. Stories of a lost golden age, great floods, or powerful teachers who brought knowledge to humanity are found on nearly every continent. This repetition raises an important question: why do these narratives persist? One possibility is that myths preserve distorted memories of real events. As generations pass, factual details can fade, while emotional significance remains. Over time, historical experiences may transform into symbolic stories, shaped by culture, belief, and oral tradition. What begins as an account of collapse or recovery can slowly become legend. In societies where writing was limited or lost, storytelling became the primary method of preserving the past. These stories were not intended as precise records. Their purpose was to convey meaning, values, and warnings. As a result, technical knowledge may have been replaced with metaphor, and real people may have become larger-than-life figures. When myths describe beings who taught agriculture, architecture, or astronomy, they may reflect moments when advanced knowledge was reintroduced after periods of loss. To later generations, this sudden appearance of understanding could feel extraordinary, even otherworldly. The language of myth offers a way to explain such changes without technical explanation. This does not mean myths should be read as literal history. However, dismissing them entirely may overlook valuable clues. Patterns, shared themes, and recurring motifs can hint at common human experiences shaped by ancient disruptions. Seen this way, myths are not evidence of forgotten technology, but echoes of memory. They may point toward events that were significant enough to be remembered, even after their original context was lost. Archaeology is one of the most powerful tools we have for understanding the past, but it operates within clear limits. What we uncover is shaped not only by what once existed, but by what survived, what can be accessed, and what we know how to interpret. As a result, large portions of human history may remain beyond our reach. Much of the Earth's surface is unexplored or difficult to study. Dense forests, deserts, ice-covered regions, and deep oceans conceal vast areas that may have once supported human activity. Many early settlements were likely built near water, yet coastlines have shifted dramatically over time. Areas that were once dry land are now submerged, placing potential evidence far below the surface. Even on land, older layers are often buried beneath newer ones. Cities are frequently built on top of earlier settlements, compressing thousands of years of history into a single location. Excavating these layers is slow, expensive, and sometimes impossible without disturbing what came later. In many cases, sites are left untouched to preserve what is already known, even if deeper layers remain unexplored. Interpretation also plays a role. Archaeological findings must fit within existing frameworks to be understood. When discoveries challenge established timelines or expectations, they are often met with caution. This does not imply intentional dismissal, but it does mean that unconventional explanations require strong, repeated evidence to gain acceptance. Because of these constraints, archaeology offers a partial record rather than a complete one. It shows us moments frozen in time, not the full flow of human experience. What is missing may be just as important as what is found, reminding us that the story of our past is still unfinished and open to revision. Taken together, these ideas point toward a simple but powerful conclusion: human history may be far older and more complex than it currently appears. What we know today is not a complete record, but a surviving outline shaped by time, loss, and preservation. The story we tell about the past is based on what remains, not necessarily on everything that once existed. This perspective does not require rejecting modern science or archaeology. Instead, it invites humility. It reminds us that our understanding is provisional, limited by evidence that has endured rather than by the full range of human experience. Gaps in the record are not failures of research. They are natural consequences of deep time. If advanced knowledge existed before recorded history, it does not mean that ancient people lived exactly as we do today. Their achievements may have followed different priorities, using methods and materials unfamiliar to us. What matters is not how closely their world resembled ours, but that human capability may have expressed itself in many forms, some of which left only faint traces. This view also reframes progress. Advancement is not guaranteed, and loss is not rare. Civilizations can forget as easily as they can discover. Skills can vanish, systems can collapse, and entire ways of life can fade into silence. What we inherit is shaped as much by survival as by innovation. Understanding this does not diminish the present. It deepens it. It places modern society within a long continuum of trial, adaptation, and rediscovery. The past becomes not a simple starting point, but a layered landscape of achievements and setbacks. In this light, the question is no longer whether advanced technology existed before known history, but how much of humanity's story remains unseen and how carefully we must listen to the fragments that still remain. As we bring this story to a close, what matters most is not proving a single theory or rewriting history overnight. What matters is staying open to the possibility that the human story is deeper, older, and more intricate than we often assume. The past may not be a simple timeline of progress, but a layered record shaped by discovery, loss, and renewal. What we see today are fragment structures, stories, and patterns that survived when so much else was erased. These fragments invite curiosity rather than certainty. They encourage us to question familiar narratives and to recognize how much may still lie hidden beneath the surface of time. Understanding history this way does not weaken our present knowledge. It strengthens it, reminding us that human potential has always existed, even when its traces have faded. The unanswered questions are not gaps to fear, but spaces that invite careful thought and continued exploration. Thank you for spending this time reflecting on the past. If you found this story meaningful, feel free to stay with the channel for more quiet explorations into history, memory, and the ideas that connect us across time. Until next time, take care, and thank you for listening.